Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Black Mental Health Matters show, where we engage in conversation to deepen our learning about mental health challenges confronting the global Black community. I'm your host, Erica Dolland, and today we'll explore the impact of our connection to nature. We'll explore the impact our connection to nature has on our mental wellness. Thank you again for joining us with this week's episode of Black Mental Health Matters. Today, we're going to discuss a fascinating topic, nature's role in our mental health. Joining us today to help us understand this more is Sonia Harte. Sonia is a licensed virtual religious science practitioner who holds a BA in theology from the University of the West Indies. She has completed 2 units of clinical pastoral education. She currently works at the Lotus Blossom Foundation for Spiritual Oneness, Incorporated, and leads the Lotus Blossom Study Group. She has over 10 years of experience in the field of experiential teaching, which she gained through working with Higher Heights, a team-building, motivation, and leadership training company. Soon, she will launch a Centers for Spiritual Living teaching chapter in Barbados. Sonia, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, so let's get into this topic about nature's impact on our mental wellness. I think it's important before we even explore the nuances of nature that we first have a firm understanding of what do we mean when we talk about nature.
Nature has to do with the great outdoors, and not just the great outdoors in terms of the soil that we walk on and the trees and stuff like that. But nature, for me, also has to do with the cosmos, the elements that we can see at night, the stars, the moon, the entire planet as it exists. I consider to be nature.
That's beautiful. That's cool. Yeah, I think nature can be very broad and expansive, just depending on who you are and where you're located, and in your connection to it and understanding of it. Which leads me to my next question: What's the distinction between accessing nature and connecting with nature?
Well, we can all access nature because we live on the planet. We have access to the planet, but connecting to nature basically means that you make that conscious decision to connect. You make that decision where I'm going to acknowledge that even though I am on the planet, there are parks, there's the beach. If you live in Barbados, that's the place where most people connect. we go to the beach, and we connect to that by bringing our higher self into alignment with the
Mm,
physical environment. And by
mm,
that, I mean becoming so conscious that when you walk, you are conscious of the earth's energy. You're conscious that when I do this, I'm seriously connecting to the vibration and energy of the planet. When you
mm,
go into the water to bathe, you do that from a place of being conscious of the water and not taking the water for granted. Hey, I'm just in here splashing around, but rather I am conscious of this water. I'm conscious that this water is energy, it is life giving.
mm.
Not to forget the point that the water is also very purifying.
Mm, mm. So what I'm hearing you say is there's a conscious element to it, right? That it's not just physically being within that space, but a conscious awareness of I heard you use the term energy. Could you say some more about that? That might be new for some people. What do you mean when you talk about energy?
I'm going to try to explain this as best I can.
Yeah, please.
But everything that we experience is energy. Our bodies are energy. Everything is a form of energy. And this solidification of that is very much dependent on the vibrational, I want to use the term level, the frequency at which it is vibrating will determine if you can see, feel, touch, smell, taste that energy form.
Mm,
Everything comes from energy, is energy. So when we connect, and I'm going to go to the area that I'm most familiar with, which is the beach in Barbados. When we go to the beach and we go for a spiritual purpose, we go for cleansing. Some people go for cleansing. Some people go for healing of the body, that physical healing of the body. And some people just want to connect to the spirit of the ocean.
mhm, mhm, mm. And how do we know that we've deeply connected to something? How do we know that I've connected versus I am now deeply connected to something?
I think when you feel that oneness with the water, when you can just go into the water, and I'm talking about being in Barbados, we can go into the water and just feel that sense of peace, that sense of balance, where nothing matters. Nothing matters. You're just at one with the water. You're just there absorbing the water, and the water is just holding you into it. But again, you can just go and just splash around and swim, but it is making the connection that the water is a spiritual source, it is a spiritual energy. It's
Mm,
making that connection rather
mm,
than saying, oh, this is just water. And in a lot of instances in our lives, we take the elements for granted. We fail to realize that we're connected to everything. Take our bodies, for example. Our bodies are made up of, I think, either 70 or 80% water.
mm,
So
mm,
imagine when you go into that water, if you can lay float and just be buoyant and close your eyes and connect to your higher self.
mm,
You're not there just to say, well, you know what, I'm going to the beach today, I'm going to swim, I'm going to just enjoy the water for the sake of enjoying the water. But you're there to connect with the water in a significant way, in a form of deep meditation,
mm,
to
mm,
heal. There are some African, I don't remember which one it is. I'm thinking that it is Orisha that honors the water, honors
mm,
the ocean to be specific. I'm thinking that that's the one that honors the ocean.
mm.
But I stand corrected. Yes, if anyone who has joined us knows differently, they can put it in the chat. But I think it's Orisha, and this is a very old African tradition,
Mm, mm,
spiritual tradition
mm,
of connecting to source.
mm, mm,
So imagine you're feeling a bit depressed and you decide, you know what, today's the day I'm going to go down to the ocean. I'm going to walk on that white sand. And I'm bringing my Barbadian experience because I live in Barbados and we have summer all year round. I'm going to walk on that warm sand. And I don't know if you've heard of the term, the meditation walk,
mm, mhm,
where as you walk, you're connecting to source. As you walk, you are being conscious. Every time your foot touches the soil, you're being conscious of that soil, of that sand. So basically, you're connecting. And these are ways that help when you're feeling depressed.
Mm.
Most people that I know who live on the island, when they're having a bad moment, they'll tell you, I'm going to the sea. And I think I'm going to bring this in, maybe a bit of superstition, but island people tend to think that there's something special about the salt water warding off bad spirits.
Mm.
So I think for a lot of us, it is not just the water, but the content of the water, which is salt, to not only soothe the body, but to bring calmness to the soul as well.
Mm. Mm. I definitely find water to be very healing and tranquil. Not just water on our body, but you think about it, like you said, our body is 80% water. We drink water, we drink warm water to soothe ourselves. We drink water to hydrate ourselves. So it would only seem natural that in connecting to water, even though we're not consuming that it would have that same healing, therapeutic, calming, rejuvenating qualities. I'm curious though, we're speaking a lot about the islands, and my father's Grenadian, so I'm very familiar with the islands and spending time on the beach, and the power of that. I want to be conscientious though that we have audience members who
Are
listeners who may not be from the islands or have access to the beach. Um, so what if I don't have access to beach or water, or I live, somewhere else? What are other ways that I can connect to nature?
other ways to connect to nature
Does
is
it have to
by
just be water?
I personally love gardens. I find gardens to be very calming. So if you have a park that have lots of beautiful flowers, you can go take a walk in the park. That is very calming. That is very healing. Connecting with the forest. If you live in a forested area, I think in Japan there is something called trip. Not let me say, but let's for want of a better word, let's say tree bathing. The tree bathing or forest
Forest
bathing.
bathing. Yep.
Yeah, but there's a specific word for it. Tring ring something.
Um,
I don't remember the terminology.
I know in the UK they use forest bathing. That's a common term used there.
Forest bathing,
Yep.
yes. Where
Forest
you just
bathing.
go,
Excuse me. Forest bathing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because the thing about trees is that they take in what we breathe out.
Hmm.
So all that carbon dioxide that we breathe out, the tree takes in and then it gives us back oxygen. So imagine you are in a forest where all of this is taking place, where you're being oxygenated all the time, constantly, because you're spending so much time with the trees, in the trees, under the
Hmm.
trees. Imagine being in that environment and how it will impact on your hormones. You can help me out here. I know the happy hormones. I think is serotonin,
Mm-hmm.
and is it dopamine?
Dopamine.
And dopamine, yes. So imagine that your brain is being energized with clean oxygen. You are away from the smog. You're away from the big cities. You are in that place where the oxygen is pure. That alone is healing.
Mm-hmm.
Mentally, that alone is healing. And I'm saying this for persons who are suffering from trauma and depression. I cannot speak to persons who are on meds for whatever reason, because they're varying degrees of mental health issues. And I still think there's a lot that we don't really understand when it comes to mental health issues. But this is what trees will do for you. This is what nature will do for you. And you don't have to connect to it. You just have to walk through the area without fear. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
share this experience I had once in a wooded area in Barbados, because we're too small to have a what you call a forest, but in a wooded area of Barbados. And I had gotten to the location early, and we're doing a program, the outdoor adventure-based training program. And at this time, someone had said, or someone had released a snake in the area that I was in St. Joseph. And I remember going into that wooded area to set up the trail. And at first, I had a bit of trepidation because you're hearing things knocking and things crawling until I became silent. And I said, no, you got this. I became silent. And once I could identify all of the different forest sounds or wood sounds in the woods, I was then able to carry out my task without trepidation. And trepidation, I think, is like on that spectrum of anxiety. You have a little bit of fear going on. But I was able to overcome that once I could, and and those songs, once I identified, oh, that's a bird flying out of a tree, that's a tree branch knocking, that is little berries from the trees falling, that's a lizard running through the dry leaves. Once I was able to identify that, there was that calm. And I think that that is important if you're going to be walking in a wooded area, especially if you're alone, to be able to identify the other songs of nature.
Mm.
Once you can identify the songs of nature, then you can find your balance, your calmness, and just connect. And that too is healing.
Mm.
Very, very healing. I personally like spending time alone in quiet areas, in areas where you wouldn't find a lot of people. And I find that to be very, very healing. Here on the island, there are so many places you can go to. You have the wooded areas. You have there's a place that people go to on the eastern part of the island called Pori Springs. No, not Pori Springs, Pot House Springs, where they go and it's a little stream of water just rippling. People bathe there. People just sit there and listen to the sound of the water just running.
Mm.
And this is one of the experiences I also have on another island, the island of Dominica. Being able to sit by the water
Mm.
and just listen to that water running all day long.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
And that's what you want to connect to for healing.
Mm.
The thing in Barbados that has shifted a lot for some areas where development has now taken place, we have housing developments taking place. We don't have the same level of green pastures. We're small. Imagine if the majority of the land mass is now being utilized for housing, and therefore children don't have those safe spaces anymore to run and play because you now have these two-story houses, large houses, and gated houses, and
Mm.
the majority of the land is being taken up for that purpose. I will say, however, that wherever there's a housing development, land is allocated for parks.
Mm.
But housing developments are primarily for the middle class and up.
Mm.
So the children in the village are left without those safe spaces to run and play and to run barefoot on the grass. And again, this is another area of connecting to nature, being able to walk barefoot on the grass.
Yeah, I
Connect
think you
again
bring up a
to
really
that.
interesting point. That's a really interesting point because there is, when we talk about nature and access to green spaces, we can't do that without talking about class privilege. And why are there certain people who, at least in the US, and I know in other parts of the world, who tend to have more money, who live in communities that have access to green spaces, to parks, where um, it's more readily available and it's easier to access. Where people who are not in these communities may have parks, but you brought up a really good point that it may not be safe to take off your shoes and walk around in the grass. Um, so I think that's an excellent point, and I think that's something that we need to touch on is the class privilege in terms of nature and in terms of access. So I'm curious though, suppose I'm new to this. I'm hearing talk about nature and wellness and energy and higher being, and this all sounds fascinating. What if I'm completely new to this? This is my first time hearing about this, and I, Sonia, want to get to where you are, to the level where you're talking about listening to the birds or listening to the songs of nature and connecting with it. What are things that I can do right now to help me build that connection? What can I do right now? And what are possible challenges that I might run into that you could give me some advice on overcoming?
First, we need to know, where do you live? Because this will determine whether or not you have access to a green and safe space to go walk, to sit, meditate, to maybe do your yoga. Are you having fresh air? Because I know for some people, if you live in a big city, you have to deal with smog all day long. It all depends on where you are located. And then it depends too on your financial circumstances. Do you have the resources to travel from one location to another, to go to a place where, let's say you live in New York City and you decide, you know what, I'm going to take a vacation to Grenada, Barbados, Dominica, Jamaica, and I'm not going to stay in the regular resort. I'm going to find a nice little cottage in the countryside and spend my vacation there. And again, it comes down to having the finances to move out from where you're at. But if I'm hearing you correctly, you want to know how to reach that level of being at peace with nature. If I'm hearing you correctly.
Yes. How do I, what do I begin to do now? This is completely new to me. I'm very interested in this. I don't know how to even just get my feet wet and just begin to do this. It sounds very kind of esoteric and foreign, but what are the first steps that I can just start taking right now?
I'm going to start by saying that you can start by spending time alone. Creating that environment, that sacred space within your own environment. Spend time alone. Listen to calming music. It could be the old classics by Mozart, Chopin, Beethoven, or it could be India Ari. One of her songs that I really like is I Am Light. And it comes down to what you feel comfortable with in terms of starting. But it is also find a sacred space, a space that you can call your own, a space that is not cluttered with anything, like, it's just empty space where you can spread a mat, a cushion, sit, and get intimate with yourself.
I like that idea. I think there's also too, there's YouTube channels that just have like sounds of nature that you can just listen to, the wind blowing or water running, which I think is a great opportunity, or it's something that's accessible, I think, to most people.
That's correct.
That they can just listen to, even if you don't have it outside your doors or within your community. It's something you can access online, and I think it's a nice introduction into feeling the healing powers, the connectedness to nature that exists.
Yes, without being in nature itself.
Yes.
And that's something I was going to say, you can do this virtually. You don't have to go physically, because you may not always have the financial resources to take a trip out to a place like maybe Cancun or Barbados. And we do have a lot of beautiful places where you can just go and relax. And the thing about being on an island is that you're surrounded by water. So wherever you go, you're going to hear the crashing of water. But you are correct. There are YouTube videos that you can listen to where you can have all those songs of nature.
Yes. Yeah.
Right in your living room, into your living space.
Yeah.
But as I say, you still have to create the ambiance for it. You still have to create that sacredness in your space, and get comfortable with who you are. Talk to your higher self. Some people may say God, or some people may say source, but to connect to your higher self in a safe environment where there's no one else around. You can do that, yeah. You can listen to videos. You can go into yoga poses. There's so many ways to connect to nature.
Yeah. So can you tell us, what do the studies tell us about the benefits of being in nature? What are the wellness indicators? What are they telling us about how this impacts our mental health? I know you had brought up depression and anxiety earlier, but could you speak more to that?
I can only speak to, I should say, I can only speak to. What I do is always from a spiritual nature. I'm not going to go into the area of the clinician because I cannot speak to that. I may have done a bit of studies in clinical pastoral care, but I cannot speak to that. What I will say is that when you are in an environment that is calming, and as I said earlier, you're going to release all of those pleasant hormones, those hormones that put you in a happy place. And that depends on the person. Because there's some people you can take them to the nicest place and say, look, but if they're not ready for that, if they're not ready, taking them on a nature trail for a walk will not in any way impact on their mental health wellness. It would not. The person has to make that conscious decision. I'm ready to do this. I'm going to explore going for a trip on the water. It could be kayaking. It could be a nature trail, as I say, walking through the woods. Or it could just be lay floating on water, walking on the beach, running in the park, barefooted in the park. But the person has to be in that space of saying, I am ready to heal my life. Healing does not take place until the client is ready. The client comes and says, I'm ready for this. And I'm speaking from experience. Because sometimes, very often, you have a client come to you and they come to you year after year, year after year, but there is no progress. Our minds are fascinating. And sometimes we can run that reel of negativity continuously. You speak to someone and on the same issue, time and time again, but in a different way. And I'm saying this from personal experience. It is the same picture being painted over with a different color paint all the time. But it is the same picture. Healing can only take place when I am ready to heal. That is the power of our minds. The mind has to be ready. It has to come to that place where it says, you know what? I'm ready to go for a walk in the park.
Yeah.
I'm not going to allow myself to be hemmed in the house all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, working with clients, and I like working with the mind, yes. And in as much as I will like working with the mind, I also like working with the soul. The two are so interconnected. So to bring someone with a consciousness that's not ready to shift gears, taking them into nature, I don't think, yeah. We can say, based on the studies, this should be the likely outcome. But before getting there, what happens?
Yeah.
What happens?
Yeah. That's fascinating. Yeah, it is before you can connect with nature, how are you connected with yourself? There's that intuitiveness that is necessary. And I also think, like you said, it deepens your connection once you go out with nature. Because once you are in alignment with yourself and in meditative flow, and I may not be using the right spiritual language here that you use in your practice.
You are.
I call it like a meditative flow. Once you have that and you go then and you immerse yourself in nature, it's a beautiful, just symbiotic relationship that's just a flow of energy that is just moving back and forth. I can't even put it into words. I have a beautiful trail next to our home in Minnesota that I just walk along for hours. And I can't tell you how therapeutic it is just to be amongst the trees and the woods and just not even in my thoughts, just in breath and in harmony with with what it is that I'm experiencing. It's powerful. I can't even put it into words, which is
Yeah,
why you're here to put it
yeah,
into words.
no, but that's why it's important to understand the spectrum or the of mental health illness that you're dealing with. If someone is depressed, you
Mm-hmm.
can say to them, "Come, let's go for a walk in the park, in the trees," and that will change their mood.
Mm-hmm.
If you're dealing with psychosis, something that is totally different, when
Mm-hmm.
a person, I don't want to use the word comatose, but when they are really not there, they're not present mentally, there is no way you're going to get that person into a different headspace,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because it comes down to making conscious
Mm-hmm.
decisions about when someone turns up and knock on your door and say, okay, I'm here, Erica, I'm here because this issue is happening with me. I am not sleeping, I don't feel well, something is going on, and I cannot identify what is going off for me, but I'm not feeling my normal self.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
can you can deal with that person. They can have the nature therapy, yes, but as I said, if they're in a different place,
Yeah.
if they're not at home, what do you do?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, this show focuses on Black mental health.
It does.
And we've talked about the value, the importance of nature in improving the mental wellness. My question for you is, what are some of the barriers do you think that Black people feel or experience in connecting to nature? And I say that as I remember as being a kid, I thought nature was a very white area of interest. I never heard about Black people being in
Okay.
nature and going on hikes and valuing, saving the trees and spending time out there. It was to me it was a very, and to a lot of young Black people, it was a very, I mean, I was also back in the day. I know things have changed, but it was a domain that was very kind of white centric, white dominated. Um, White explored. You never really saw people of color associated with or talking about extensively the power of nature in their own lives, or even wanting to spend time to immerse themselves in it. So I'm curious, what do you think are some of those barriers that Black people might be facing, other than the what we talked about, the access to green spaces? With those of us living in urban communities where we might not be able to have those spaces, where do you think some of that disconnect might come from, and how can we move past that?
There's a word that I want to use, and I'm not going to use it. I'm going to explain. Walking in the park is a luxury for most of us who would have come out of the slave background, come from a slave background. Walking would have been a luxury. When you think of how we have been programmed to just work to get ahead, you brought some people over from Africa and you say, this is your lot in life. You're supposed to work, 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 work. Walking is a luxury. Relaxing is a luxury. And I think that for a lot of us, it is still ingrained in our consciousness. Let me say consciousness, subconscious mind. That is still ingrained in our subconscious mind. And I don't know if you have ever encountered people who feel guilty for taking a break to this day. I know because I've suffered from that for a while. I've had friends say, don't you keep still?
Hmm.
Because you feel guilty if you sit back and there's work to be done. And you feel guilty if you're not
Mhm.
working, if you're not busy doing something. I think that that is one of the major barriers to Black people taking advantage of the environment that they're in. I think so, especially for persons who've come from that colonialism background and slavery
Mhm.
background. Taking a
Mhm.
walk is a a luxury. Where you going? What you doing?
Yeah, yeah.
I know growing up as a child, and I would hear people say, this guy always up and down the street. And they had a term for it I do not remember, but it just spoke of him being idle, nothing worthwhile to do, but he's just taking a stroll.
Hmm. Hmm.
That is one. Finances always come into the equation when you're talking about Black people and the entry into mental health wellness. When you look back over the years and you saw the spas for self care, that's for a certain class of person. That's for a certain class, not just in terms of color, but terms of finances. So again, finances play a really big role in Black people not being able to access mental
Mm.
health.
And I think
It,
too, what you just said as well is before even the accessing connecting to nature, it's giving ourselves permission to take a break. That it's okay to stop what we're doing, to stop working, to take a break and give that time to ourselves. And it's, believe it or not, there's a wonderful article by a woman named Tema Okun who talks about what are the different tenets of white supremacy that we have internalized. And one of them is guilt around taking breaks, that we always need to be in working mode, and to take a break and to give time to ourselves is an act of laziness and non-productiveness, when
you hear that
actually
often.
it is an act of rest in kindness and in a lot of ways liberation and revolution. So
Yeah, you hear that often. Black
yeah.
people are lazy.
Yes, yes, yes. So it's, we need to do that to us, exactly, beyond the stereotypes that are assigned to us that are very much steeped in white supremacy, is that we need to give ourselves that kindness, that love of time and rest for ourselves. I think that's an excellent point. I'm curious, how have you incorporated nature and wellness into the work that you do in your own healing, your own therapy practice with your clients?
I'm going to be honest with you and say that I don't.
Okay. Okay.
I don't. And I don't because that is not the nature of what I'm doing currently.
Mm.
Yes, the business plan speaks to ecotourism, I should say holistic tourism, where those things will be incorporated, but not in the traditional therapy or the kind of therapy that I'm doing now. What I'm doing currently is bringing people back to wholeness through sitting, talking, getting to know you, what your issues are, and of course, praying with you. What I do is something called affirmative prayer, which is the opposite of whatever, I shouldn't say the opposite, but affirmative prayer is a scientific method of praying for a person by affirming the good for them that they are desirous of experiencing.
Mm.
That is what I'm doing currently as a religious science practitioner. However, when the chapter gets going, the chapter that I'm opening up in about another 2 months or so gets going, yes, it will have the nature walks, swimming with the turtles, um, all of those things will be a part of it. The catamaran cruises, but all from a spiritual perspective. All with the purpose of helping people to come back to wholeness. And by wholeness, I mean not just taking care of your physical body, but also taking care of your soul, taking care of your mind.
Mm. Mhm. Is there anything else you'd like to say on this topic?
Yes, I would. I want to say that we take our planet for granted. And our planet is alive. It is not a inanimate thing that we think it is. It is very much alive. And it wants for us to be whole. It wants for us to be healed. That's why everything on the planet works together so that human beings can have an awesome life. But
Mm.
human beings have a tendency of destroying the very thing that just wants to love and keep them here. We do things like release a lot of carbon dioxide through the vehicles that we drive, cut down trees just because we want more paper and build more houses. Fossil fuel. These are all things that contribute to our mental health issues.
Mm.
Um, because then we get into the struggle of collecting more and more and more stuff, and then you have in some areas people who say, "Well, I don't have enough."
Mm-hmm.
And you become depressed because you look at your cupboard, there's not enough food. Someone else has all of that, and they say, "Well, if you want this, you got to give me what you don't have for it." But if we can bring balance
Mm.
to humanity and work with the planet rather than exploit the planet,
Mm.
I think we would bring people into a state of mental well being where people will be happier, people will be kinder to each other, and we feed off of each other's energy.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine you walk into a room and everybody there's grumpy, you're going to feel it. But if we can create a space, a place, a space, a safe space on the planet, make the planet that haven, that
Mm-hmm.
divine habitat where all the people and all the creatures and everything on the planet is in harmony with each other, mental well being would be had by all people.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that's my opinion.
Mm. How can
But
we destroy something that is meant to help us? And you talk about energy, energy is reciprocal. So when we are giving, uh, when we are showing behaviors that is not good for the planet by not taking good care of it, that energy is going to come back to us. And like you said, it comes back in the form of mental distress, our own energy imbalance. So everything has to be in harmony with one
in
another.
harmony, in harmony.
Yes,
That's
I
why
think
we
that's
need to plant more trees.
plant more trees. Yes, use
Plant
less
more trees.
plastic,
Yeah, take
recycle.
more walks.
Yes,
Um,
I would even encourage a
embrace,
plant-based
embrace
eating,
nature.
eating more plants. Having a plant-based diet is a wonderful way to even start connecting, getting to harvest from the land and being able to take into our bodies and nourish our bodies and seeing the value in which the land was giving us.
I don't know if the plants like that. I don't think they like that very much. And I'm just saying that because we take everything for granted.
Mm, mm,
We take everything for granted. Our mental well-being is linked to how we treat each other, how we treat the planet that is supposed to sustain us. I
mm,
remember when I first started talking about the trees and serotonin and dopamine and all these wonderful hormones that make you happy. Imagine if we had more trees and more clean oxygen impacting on our brains. We'd be happy all the time. We'd be
mm,
happy for no reason.
mm.
Because
Yeah.
a lack of oxygen can create a lot of other issues. When the
Mm,
brain is starved of oxygen, you're going to have some serious issues. You're going to feel ill. The body's going to tell you, I'm not well. And that creates stress. That creates all these other aches and pains and stuff.
mm.
And when your physical being is not in a good place, your mental being is not going to be in a good place.
Which is why you need to eat well as well.
Eat,
Eat more
exercise,
vegetables,
and be
more
happy
vegetables, eat
and
more
be
plants.
kind and be kind. You let the love from inside just come out and just be warm and welcoming and be happy.
Well, I'm a vegetarian, so I have to advocate for eating the vegetables and plants.
I'm a part-time vegetarian. I do it. I do it when my body says, "Okay, it's time to stop eating." Or
Yeah.
a
And
couple
I'm
years ago, the doctor said to me, "Do not eat anything that has a mother or face because of
mhm,
diabetes.
yeah.
Don't eat anything that has a mother or face." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, how am I going to do that?"
Right,
And
right.
I try, but it does not always work.
Mm, yeah.
But I love vegetarian food. I love vegan food. I enjoy cooking it.
Yeah.
And
And I
I,
feel more connected to nature when I'm eating vegetables. I think about where this came from, the land that nourished it, the soil in which it came from, hands that harvested it, and now it is in my kitchen and going to be in my body. And how could I not want to be connected to something more deeply?
yeah, and I understand that. I think that when we eat food that has been traumatized, that
Mm,
impacts our body, that impacts our energy, because that's what you're taking into you.
mm,
And don't say that I said that, because a lot of people out there who love meat, but are we conscious of how the animals are kept, how they are slaughtered?
mm,
That's why I would advocate for kosher or halal.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
You pray before you slaughter, and you pray before you eat, and all of that's wonderful stuff. And I think if you watch The Life of Pi, you ask permission.
Mm-hmm.
You ask permission.
Yeah.
You'll be surprised how another creature might say, okay, but we don't ask permission. We take it for granted.
Mm,
Um, I'm going to share this with you because people think I'm crazy. I have a tendency of, if a centipede comes into the house, I have a tendency of scooping it up in the dustpan and putting it back outside. And I know most people say, no, you got to kill, 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 kill. And I said, no, this is a part of the ecosystem that keeps the whole system working harmoniously. He has a purpose. He
everything has a
tells the
purpose.
soil. Yeah, he tells the soil. He keeps things
Yeah.
in rotation for me. So when you create that imbalance, and I think we've gone off the topic of mental health,
No, but
yeah,
it's,
when you create that imbalance, in nature, you
but
do
I
more harm than good.
but I can speak to that as well. I used to be the type of person where there was a bug in the house or something, and my initial instinct was to kill it. For what reason do I have to kill something that is just really not in the right place and needs to be escorted back to where it comes from? So I like you will scoop it up and just put it back outside.
Yes,
But again,
keep the balance.
I wouldn't
Keep the
have to keep
balance.
the balance, but I wouldn't have that connectedness have I not had that within myself, right?
Yeah, you have to keep the balance,
Exactly. So there's a
and that's
balance and an awareness within myself that allows me now to be connected to something else that is a part of me, although it doesn't live in my house, it lives in nature and it's a part of me, and I'm giving it back to nature.
yeah. And when you go out in nature, you're going into the environment of the others.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
imagine if you go there with fear and anger, and you want to kill everything rather than becoming one with nature,
Mhm.
absorbing the energy of nature, and feeling good to know that there are trees that are sustaining you because they are taking in that carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen so that you and I and every other living creature on the planet can live,
Yeah,
can survive.
that's amazing.
And that's why, yeah, nature is connected to mental well-being, but only if you are in the headspace to recognize that. You
And
have to be in the
connectedness.
headspace to recognize that.
Yeah, that's
So, in
beautiful.
as much as there are a lot of studies and clinical studies on nature and well-being, until you actually put persons with different degrees of mental health illness into the environment and do the real testing to see how it impacts, then but I can say that nature does help with our overall mental and emotional well-being. It does.
Yes. Well, Sonia, you have given us quite a bit of food for thought. I know we've spent the last 5 minutes talking about food, which is why I said that. You've given us some very good food for thought on this topic, and I'm quite confident that our listeners are walking away from this with a deeper understanding of nature's role in our mental wellness and things that they can do to develop that connection. Um, how can our viewers learn more about you, and where can they find you?
Issue going on. Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay, where can they find me?
Yep.
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook as Sonia Harte, and that's where you'll find me at the
Okay.
moment.
So LinkedIn and Facebook is where they can find you. Do you have a website?
Not as yet. That has been worked on at the moment. That has been worked on at the moment.
Okay. Okay. Well, Sonia, again, we are so grateful to have you onto the show. And for all of our listeners, thank you, thank you, thank you for joining us. You can learn more about Black Mental Health Matters at www.bmhm.com. Thank you again, and we look forward to you joining us next week.
For sure. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.